foster research and credibility skills in students. This is a webinar. And what we're going to do today is unpack online research and provide strategies, tools, resources for you to apply with your learners. It's for educators, for people in the field of education, and for anybody interested in the topic. This is Pamela. I really appreciate you joining me here today. And as a little bonus, we're going to give you a free booklet for research skills. If you want a copy, please stick around until the end, and we'll tell you how you can get your copy. Also, please don't worry about trying to take extensive notes. We'll show you how to get a copy of the slides at the end of this workshop. And before we get started, everyone will be on mute mode. There is a chat feature for posting your questions and comments, which you can see there. On the right, this says, oh, look, people have already started chatting. Hi there, Kelly. And please save your questions for the end. Let's all go to the chat and let us know from where you are joining us and say hello. We have people here joining from Media Savvy Citizen and from Taos, New Mexico. I know we have people from Rio Rancho Public Schools. And if you don't want to chat, that's okay. So people are still joining in. It looks like we see our numbers is increasing as we're going to talk. And we have people from Las Cruces in New Mexico, with somebody from Canada joining us, from Albuquerque, from Taos. And I'm just going to keep going. I just want to welcome you all as you start to get situated. We'll talk about what we're going to do today. So the overview. So we're going to explore all the different facets of online research. And by the time this webinar has ended, you'll know a little bit more about the research process, and you'll discover the who, what, where, when, why questions to evaluate sources, and understand and get some tips for being productive, for conducting productive research. And this is ideally will be applied to all education levels. And you'll have some research tools to use with your students. So let's see. I did not advance the slide. So that is the slide that I should have advanced. I apologize for that. This is the overview. And you got this overview when you signed up for the webinar, right? And I just went over what we were going to do. And I want to tell you a little bit about who Media Savvy Citizens is. And we are a New Mexico-based entity. We're facilitating the understanding, the positive participation, and meaningful media interaction for New Mexico learners. We focus on enhancing media literacy and media fluency initiatives. So media fluency in the sense of like a language, being fluent, being able to read and understand it, comprehend, critically think, and participate with any and all technologies, pretty much any and all media technologies, right? And so we consult, design, and implement coaching, workshops, courses. We do capacity building trainings for adults and students on site and virtually. So our work is focused in New Mexico, but we can work outside of the state. And right now we are supporting educators transition to digital classrooms through coaching, virtual meetings, an online course, lesson planning, and collaborative designing. This year, we launched this program. It's a Teachers Transform Media Fluency Professional Development Program. We're working with about 30 districts across the state, enhancing media literacy with training and coaching for the uniqueness of New Mexico, which is very spread out geographically and diverse culturally, and has different technical needs, as we're seeing now at this stage of this transition that we are all experiencing. at this moment in time. So it's truly a gift to work with these teachers and be able to witness their transformation and support their transformation. And some of these teachers are here with us today. Welcome, everybody. So our teachers have the opportunity to meet weekly as one component of the program. And one participant at last Monday's meeting said, "This has kept me going," meaning the meetings where we come together in community to learn from and support each other. We started meeting via Zoom back at the end of January or maybe early February. And so teachers are very comfortable with that already. And as the educational shift happened, they were way more comfortable with the transition with that. Some teachers come to us for technical support. Others want to troubleshoot something, while others want to know that they're not alone. And they're not. And neither are you. And we hope we can provide some information to sharpen your skills and cut through some of that noise, some of that internet noise, the digital noise. My name is Pamela Pereira. I'm the founder of Media Savvy Citizens. And over the past 20 years, I've worked with many students and teachers across New Mexico with media literacy initiatives and through various learning institutions, with various learning institutions. My background is in communications, but I have a lot of experience in design and production, and I have a master's in media studies and have a lot of experience in media literacy. Plus, working in schools helps to inform the direction and focus in building media fluency and new media literacy skills for all learners. Joining us today is Rachel Exposito, a school librarian from Powahka Valley Schools and a teacher with experience with working with students and teachers about research strategies and resources. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. It's really great to be here with you all. So just a brief intro, I'm the district library manager and high school librarian at the Powahka Valley School District, like Pamela mentioned. I received my Master of Library and Information Science from UCLA, and I've worked in both Los Angeles and New Mexico as a public librarian and a school librarian for over 15 years. And I'm just really happy to be here and share some of what I know.
Oh, thank you. So, so what we're going to do is we are discussing conducting effective online research. So we are in the age of the internet, and we need to know how to find, how to process, how to evaluate and communicate information. And we are curious human beings. Our curiosity takes us on a journey online that involves sifting through a lot of information. As adults and also kids do the same. So in order for us to be effective, we need to sharpen our skills, from formulating questions to staying on track for a meaningful discovery. And why now? Well, we've always been doing this, and now we're just doing it through a different interface, which is called the internet, right? So students are right now online and they're researching all kinds of stuff, and we can help them with their research. I just wanted to make the link here between research and media literacy. And media literacy's official definition is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, create, and act using all forms of communication. So today we discuss research as it relates to access, analyze, and evaluate. And what people do with the research is the create or act component. Some write research papers, others press the send button and share it. Rachel, do you want to talk about how to research?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off with talking a bit about strategies for teaching students how to conduct research. Before I begin, I just want to recognize that this is a super broad topic, and it includes all sorts of skills that we're not necessarily address all of them today. So we're not going to be talking about things like citing sources or how to do advanced searches or plagiarism, and there's a lot more to it. But what we will be discussing is we're going to be focusing on just the discovery part and talking about a general process that we can follow and that students can follow when looking for information. So first, let's just define research. Anytime we're seeking information from a source with the goal of learning something new, we are conducting some sort of research. So this can be formal academic research that's very systematic, or informal research that's much more casual and is done just to satisfy a curiosity or to learn more about a personal interest. So we'll be considering both kinds of research here. And it's also definitely worth pointing out why it's important that students understand and use the research process that I'm going to be talking about today. So following the research process increases students' overall information and literacy skills, makes them more savvy consumers of information. It will help them to think critically about the information they're consuming and sharing. It helps to prepare them for intelligent and responsible participation in a democratic society in which they have all sorts of information, and information is omnipresent, as Pamela was discussing. Of course, it also helps to prepare them for college. And finally, it helps to prevent them from feeling overwhelmed by all this information that's available to them. So before we go on to talk about this process, we'd like to learn a little bit more about your comfort level when teaching students how to conduct research and how to evaluate sources. So here is a poll, and I believe that poll is going to show up for you guys.
It's there.
Is there? Okay. Yep. If you could please take a moment to consider this question and answer honestly. After answering, if you want to share in the chat what you cover in this area, just use a few keywords to let us know. We'd love to hear about that as well.
Right. So the question is, how comfortable are you in teaching research and evaluation skills in your classes? Now, nobody knows. We're not going to know who's answering, so you can you can be honest.
Totally anonymous.
Yeah. At this point, our participants are saying that about, oh, it's interesting. Okay, so 50% are moderately comfortable, and well, 40% are moderately. I love how this is just changes as people, it's live, right? So I'm actually not going to do the percentage part until we close the poll because it keeps changing, and it's like, oh, it goes up and it goes down, and I think we're good. Are we good here?
Yeah.
Is everybody? Yeah.
I think
Okay.
So. Okay.
So 40% said they're moderately comfortable, 28% said they're very comfortable, and 28% said they're uncomfortable. So we're glad that you're here, and we hope that we can help you be more comfortable with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wait. Numbers went down. 37% moderately, 37 very comfortable, 25 uncomfortable. Okay, so we can end the poll. Thank you for letting us know. And then, yeah. And so we're looking here at, it looks like keywords, credible sources, multiple sources, paraphrasing. Those are the things one person is covering. We want to know what else you're also covering when you are when you're teaching about research skills or the research process. Anybody want to chat it out? Well, as you're doing that, I think, Rachel, you can begin to talk about this.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we as we're going through the presentation, feel free to share in the chat. Okay, so generally speaking, there are a couple things about the research process, which can also be called the inquiry process, as you see here, that are very important to keep in mind. So the first thing is that the process is iterative. It's not like a linear process where you go in, you do a search, you get some sources, and then you're done. It doesn't work that way. The second thing is that successful research is a highly reflective process. So one thing I love about this diagram is that it shows that we move fluidly between the different steps, and that it also includes lots of great reflection questions that we can, as teachers, ask our students along the way. So totally use this diagram and use those reflection questions. Okay. So with that kind of reflective element in mind, it's best to have your students begin researching by asking questions and to really take the time to think about what they're doing, how they're doing it, what they're finding every step of the way. Now, this slide shows the beginning of the process step by step. If your students are choosing their own topics, it's really great to allow students to first choose kind of a broad topic, which they kind of tend to do anyway. And then they can reflect on what they already know about that topic and what they want to find out. And then they can start doing some like background research using sources that provide general information like encyclopedias or periodicals or a simple Google search. Then they can narrow it down based on what they learn from that background research and what kind of information they're finding is available to them. As they find this information and start to narrow down their topic, then they can work on identifying the sources they would like to use, figuring out which keywords will lead them to specific information that they're seeking, and conduct some searches using those keywords. Again, not a linear process and super reflective. So we can have them stop at any time and reflect and then evaluate some of the sources that they found, the information that they're finding, and then kind of adjust and tweak their approach as needed and search again. Okay, lastly, I just want to mention that as students are searching, we need to teach them how to determine whether or not the information they're finding is relevant to the information that they need, and whether their research itself is relevant to the community or society. Both are very important. Here are 3 questions you can ask your students to reflect on to help them do this. First, does the information you are finding relate to your topic? Second, does the source contain at least 3 quotes that you could use in your project? This is a really easy kind of benchmark that you can use with students. And third, can your findings impact your community? Of course, it's also crucial that students learn to assess the credibility of the source, and Pamela is going to address that next.
Thank you. Okay, well, assessing the credibility. So let me advance the slides. I forget to do this sometimes. Sorry about that. So what we're going to talk about in the following slides, we're going to ask questions that are going to provide answers for credibility, for bias, for accuracy, and validity. The more thorough you are, the better answers you get. So besides using these questions for research, they can be applied for encountering any media communication, any text, any photo, any mediated communication, especially before we press the send button through social media channels. They can be applied to non-digital sources as well. So we know that media messages, where do they come from? We know that they come in many forms, and each media communication deserves to be asked these questions. For example, when reading a newspaper article, so not only is the person asking questions of the news article and the news article's author, and then the news agency, because they're also the author, they're also part of the source, but also of the information in the media that's embedded in the article, such as graphs, polls, hyperlinks, and more. I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute. Okay, so let's dig in. In line with the key questions of media literacy, knowing who the storyteller is provides much insight. If a PhD in philosophy is providing information on the science of black holes, they might not be credible. But if that person has extensive experience and expertise in the field, then they might be credible. And so, it's really understanding who the author is and figuring out what makes them credible or not. So we're looking for, depending on the subject and the topic, subject matter experts on technical information. That's important. We need to know, obviously, when we talk about who's the source, like who's telling the story, which scholar, which entity do they represent, who's backing the research. All of that involves the story, the person who the author is, because they all have influence in telling a certain part of that story. And so now I list some questions here of, do they have a contact page? Do they have an about page or a publisher's page? And, researching the author is really important to understand the context of, what we're discovering. And so then it's digging in to the information, right? Which is the next section. Every media communication has a story. Even data has a story. And what is said and even what is not said is part of the story. So asking about the story reveals and just keeps on revealing. So behind every story, there's a person with a point of view. So there's, as much as people want to be objective, bias is always going to be present, but really understanding what that is, right? Why? That's why finding multiple sources is important to understand an issue and the possible bias that might be there in the way that a certain piece of evidence or some story is being told and what the slant is, right? So if other sources don't have similar information, then it's a possibility that the way that one side of the story is being told is skewed or fake or misleading. And of course, having a basic understanding whether something's fact or opinion is really going to go a long way into sifting through the information, because then, if you go to a blog about something technical, then that right away it doesn't matter, unless that person is a subject matter expert. So the questions is it believable? Is it supported by evidence? Especially if it's something technical, right? Can other sources verify that information? Those are the questions when we're looking at what is the information being communicated. Okay, so the next section is, where is the information located? So very much like our non-digital life, we have a system for letting us know where we are. We have road signs, we have stop signs, we have addresses, we have maps, and the internet has its own system of communicating location through a web address. It's the URL, right? The Uniform Resource Locator. And the most common ones we know are .com, .org, .net, .gov, .edu, and we provide here a list of country URL codes under the more. These are linked. If you see a lighter color and underline, then those are links. So countries, well, sometimes, you might think that something looks to be fake because it's a website that ends with, say, .au, and that means that's the country code for Australia. Or China, has its own country code, and so understanding those country codes are also important. But also there are obviously some really true sketchy URLs. It's good to have a list of those, like .xyz, right? It could be abc.com.xyz or .live or .fit, and there are more. You just have to go out and find what those are when you're teaching your students about sketchy URLs. And then there are lookalike domains that it could be even from a bank, right? Netflix, well, this is not a bank, but this is the example that I'm using called Netflix/mail.com. Well, this is not credible because nobody has mail on Netflix that I know of. And so it's always netflix.com, right? So it's just taking a little bit of time to think about what that URL is, and then the kind of information that's coming from that website, of course. So I linked here a website scanner where people can log that URL to figure out what the situation is with that website, with that URL, and it'll, this website, this is just one scanner that I linked in, but there are a few of them out there. And if you don't, and they're free to use, but if you don't want to use a website scanner, you could just use a search engine and plug in that URL to figure out what information you can find about that location. So the next thing is, when was the information created, right? So depending on the topic being research, timely information may be necessary. So if one is looking for the latest birth rates for a state, looking for information from last year is going to obviously be irrelevant. This is obvious, but currency is important. So when was it written? When was it published? Is it something that really needs to be timely? Because if it doesn't need to be timely, then it doesn't matter when it was written or published, but depending on the research again and what's being researched. Also, like, different scholars will revise and update books and research papers. And so making sure that the latest information is accessed, that's important. And something as simple as knowing if the links work will reveal relevancy and time in a media communication. So also, like, wondering, like, is the information out of date with the topic, right? Like that's so important. So the next thing and the last question that we're going to review is the why. Why was the information created? So this is the purpose, right? What's the purpose for the information? And so this is going to reveal the bias and the slant of any media communication. It's understanding if it was meant to inform, or is it to persuade or entertain? And so is the purpose made clear by the source or authors? A lot of times people who are writing research papers usually make that clear, but if it's not a research paper and it's just somebody, I don't know, discussing the health benefits of some random thing, so they should say, like, this is just my opinion, and right. So we want to know, is it clear? What why are they telling us this? Like, so asking the why really helps to understand. Also, if people have affiliations to, like, a cultural, political, or institutional organization, then we begin to understand the bias. So in this next section, we're going to provide some simple tips when researching online. And these are some tips that fact checkers apply to when they're fact checking information online. So we strive to do all of these. One of those is to, when doing an internet search, is to scroll to the bottom of the results. Don't stick to the top, and see what you find below. Sometimes people actually pay to be at the top, right? They use heavy amounts of money and information and SEO, search engine optimization, to be at the top. And so scrolling down to the bottom might produce better results. The next thing would be staying on track and remember your question and why it is that you got on the internet to begin with, to search whatever it is you're searching. And so the next, and this, we all do this, right? We all go off track, and then, whoa, okay, what am I researching again? Because it's easy to get disoriented and go off in all kinds of tangents. Skim read. And the skim reading is just like a quick, just to understand, is this relevant to what I'm trying to figure out or not? And to, again, we stated this in a previous webinar, which is reading laterally, which is also part of understanding who the author is, right? You leave the website, you leave the source, and you go find out more about that author, more about who's telling the story, and you read from other sources. Also on the topic, you can read laterally on the topic, right? Not just the source. So leaving the website and going to look for more information. The next thing, which we talked about already, is evaluating the constant evaluation of not just the specific site, but also just what you're looking at. And the next and last thing that we recommend is being organized and keeping a list of different credible sources, and then going back and re-engaging with the content. So just keeping a list going, and then being able to be effective that way. So Rachel, do you want to talk about some research tools?
I definitely do. So I just wanted to give a few practical tools that you can use with your students when they're conducting research, and maybe some tools, there might even be some things in here that you can use for your own research. So there are a few links here that you'll be able to check out and explore more in depth after the webinar, kind of as you might see the underlined bits. So first and foremost, if you have your number one tool, if you have a fully credentialed teacher librarian at your school or in your district, they are a fabulous resource when it comes to developing students' research skills. And I'm just gonna promote your school librarians here for just a second. Consider them your teaching partner when it comes to any assignment that involves research. So they can help with co-teaching, they can help you develop lesson plans. They're great for just hanging out and brainstorming a few things with. They can share new sources of information, provide resources for you, obviously. So definitely develop that relationship and use your librarian if you have one. And another thing actually that some folks are doing right now, we're all doing our online teaching. If you are having your students do anything related to research assignments right now, using like your digital classroom, if you're using like a Google Classroom or something like that, you can totally invite your librarian to be a part of that classroom, and they can pipe in whenever they feel they can be helpful. Okay, done with that. So next, there are a couple of sources that I wanted just to suggest. One is called El Portal, and I'm going to discuss that more in just a moment. So I'm going to come back to that one. And the other suggestion I wanted to mention is using a kid-friendly search engine. I know in the chat we had someone talking just a couple of minutes ago about the age appropriateness of search results. So sometimes if you use one of these search engines, there's several different ones. The one that we list here is called Sweet Search. I believe Google also has their own kid-friendly search engine. I think it's called Kiddle. So these are great because the interface is kid-friendly, and the hits that come up in their search results tend to be age-appropriate, written for a younger audience and at a lower reading level. So finally, it's also helpful to use some teaching strategies that support reflection, such as the KWL chart that's kind of shown here on this slide. So a KWL can be a fabulous tool to use at the very beginning of the research process. So you could use it at the part like right after they choose their topic, but before they begin their background research. They can do a quick reflection on what they know about that topic already and what they want to know about that topic. And then maybe after they do that background research, they can come back and fill in a little bit about what they learned. And that can help them to start to narrow that topic down and work through that research process. Inquiry charts There's a link here to a page on Reading Rockets that has several example inquiry charts, and it talks about how to use them. These are another graphic organizer that can help them kind of reflect and think about their topic and process that information as they are gathering it. And there are various other graphic organizers that we can use, find online or develop our own, that to help students kind of document the information that they find, to help them keep organized. Pamela was just talking about the importance of being organized. So graphic organizer can help with that. Graphic organizer can also help kind of guide them through evaluating sources and asking those different questions about the who wrote it and why did they write it and all of that. Okay, so again, I encourage you to check out these links at your own leisure in the PDF of the slides that's going to be available at the end of the webinar. Okay. So this is El Portal. I said I was going to come back to it, and this is it. I love El Portal. El Portal is a collection of databases and some other resources as well that every single person in the state of New Mexico can access for free. The URL for it is listed right here. It's lportalnm.org, and it's provided by the New Mexico State Library. El Portal has databases at all levels. So they have databases that are written and created just for the elementary level, just for the middle school level. And then they have high school and college as well. And there's a little menu. I don't know if you guys can see this on your slides, but there is a menu at the top of the page where you can click on the word elementary, and it'll give you a list. It's a very short list, thankfully, of databases that are fabulous for the elementary school level. And they do the same for middle school and high school as well. I find this to be invaluable. It's an amazing resource. Definitely check it out. All right, so we're going to talk just a little bit about some tips for teaching elementary school level, and then we'll do another slide after this about teaching middle school and high school level research skills. So here are a few tips for teaching research skills to elementary level students. First, you definitely are going to do a lot of vocabulary work, teaching them the basic vocabulary, and we teach them about different types of sources as well. So dictionary, atlas, encyclopedia, databases, periodicals. That might be happening in your school library already. I hope so. If not, you can definitely incorporate some of that into if you're doing a research project with your elementary level students. Before they conduct searches, you can have them just pause and really think about what keywords they might use, write them down and think about those. Starting in second grade, I would say students can do a super basic research projects in which they are looking to answer maybe specific questions that you give them on a topic that you give them, and maybe just using one source of information. By fourth or fifth grade, they might be able to do simple research projects that involve up to 3 sources. And then, of course, scaffolding with graphic organizers on these projects, super, super helpful. And then all of this teaching and learning that they do in elementary school will help lay the foundation for middle school and high school level research. So once students reach middle school and high school, we teach them to use more complex keyword searches, work through that research process using multiple types of sources, synthesizing all of that information they find using research projects that are larger in scope. Hopefully, some of these projects are projects in which they can be personally invested, like projects where they can choose their own topic. They really get into that. Then we would build also on the research-related vocabulary, teaching them concepts such as broad versus narrow. That seems like a middle school level lesson to me. Teaching them about relevance and credibility, those important words to use. good projects for teaching research skills and for developing middle school and high school students' ability to evaluate sources for credibility are research papers and annotated bibliographies, which librarians love. All right, Pamela, you want to give us a recap? I think that's about everything.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Just so we provided a lot of information, and so we just want to make sure that we're getting some closure and talk about some of the things that we covered. So as you know, we talked about asking questions, finding information, and determining relevance. I'm having a hard time speaking. Do I need to read this? I don't know, why to teach the research process. Who, what, where, when, and why questions for credibility and validity and bias and for when we're looking for evaluating information sources and websites. We also had some tips for productive research that fact checkers use and other tips for productive research that Rachel gave us for the library. And we not necessarily for the library, but the librarians recommend that we use for formal research. I'm glad I clarified that. And we also looked at different tips for different age groups of what we can do with the little ones and with elementary lower grades, upper lower grades, and middle school and high school. So that is the recap of what we did today. I just want to remind you that this is part of a free webinar series. Next week, we have student-centered learning with media and technology, engaging student interests. So if you're interested in registering for this webinar, you can go to our website, mediasavvycitizens.com. Now, what we're going to do is going to share some files, and after that, we're going to go to the Q&A. So we're going to share the PDF of this presentation, and the PDF of this presentation has links, like I said. So most things that are underlined and they're under like a lighter shade of white, then that is the link to the site that we referenced. We also are offering a digital booklet that, let's see, I want to see if you guys have, yep, there you go. If you should be able to see it below your chat. This is the other file that we are offering you, which is just a reminder of conducting effective research booklet. And we're also going to make available right now a survey. Don't take the survey if you're joining us from a phone, because you will be bumped off. But if you're not joining us from a phone, you're welcome to get that link from the chat. We would like feedback about what you valued, how it went, what else you'd like. At the end of this webinar series, your name will be entered into a drawing. Hey, forgot to turn my phone off. You'll be entered into a drawing, and we are going to give away some Media Savvy Citizen swag. So I'll give you a few minutes to access that. So even after we close the webinar, you still should be able to access this information that we gave you. We should move on now to the question and answer session. Just want to let you know that this webinar was made possible by the New Mexico Legislature and the New Mexico Public Education Department, the University of New Mexico, and Media Savvy Citizens. So I would like to take this time and ask you if you would let them know that you value the work that we're doing if you value it. And how about we go over right now to the chat and figure out what some of the questions are. I see a question here that Yutka presented. Hey, Yutka. She says, sometimes I can't tell when the info was published online. Is there an easy way to find out? Well, there are different ways to find out. Obviously, if it's a news article, then underneath the byline, which is the author who wrote the article, underneath that, there would be a date. You can also go to the bottom of the page for a copyright date and see, if there is a copyright date, then you at least know a year in which that page, the website is published, or that information is published. You can look at the URL. Sometimes the URL, the address at the top, will have the publication name, and then we'll have the month and the year. You can go back to, when you do a search and there's a web description. So in the web description, usually when you have, like, say, a list of like 15 things that of where you could go. So if you go back and do that same search of what the person was searching, then sometimes there's a date there. There's also another little trick in a search engine. You can do it through Google. I'm not sure about other search engines. It's IN URL. So IN is in Nancy. So in URL and then colon, and then the web address. And so sometimes that, and I just put it in the chat. So sometimes that will give you some information as far as when the information was published. Now, sometimes there's just no published date, and at that point the students will need to say no date or whatever format they're using if they're doing a formal research paper. Rachel, do you have any tips on that by any chance?
I don't know if I have anything to add other than what you just said. The in URL was new to me, so I'm totally using that. I'm going to try that.
Okay, cool.
I mean, I feel like my students a lot of times cannot find a date also. And to me, that's just always kind of like, well, then that's kind of like if they're scoring it, I have like a graphic organizer that they use where they kind of score the site or the source. And that ends up being like a little tick mark against the source if they can't find the date. And so it's just, it should just make you have just kind of be aware that this may not be as current as possible.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And that's a good idea. And that's a good idea to put it in your graphic organizer so students are aware. Of course, sometimes people are conducting research and they're not necessarily doing a formal research and don't have graphic organizers.
Totally.
And at that point, they're not even necessarily looking at dates. There might be, but if somebody's just conducting a random curiosity research, then it's important to, take all these things into account, as well as when determining, like, is this even credible? I've had a lot of information shared with me lately, and it's surprising because they know that I'm the media literacy gal, and so, like, recently I actually asked somebody because they shared something through Facebook Messenger, and I said, here is the information I found to show you that it's wrong, it's misleading, and I wonder, could you please send a message to everybody you sent this to, and with this link, and let them know that that it was misleading. Because if we don't correct and that's digital citizenship, right? If we're not correcting ourselves, then that's how the information just spreads quickly. Because and what this person said was, I don't have enough time to do the research. Well, if people don't have the time to research, then I don't think, they should be sharing information, because it's not good. It spreads quickly. But that's something different. And we're talking about research, right? So having the time to research and not having the time to research, and what people are researching. And we, at this point, I'm curious to know what students are researching. Because they're spending a lot of time online. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. Thanks, Rachel, for joining us and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. This was fun.
Thanks. And so we're going to close this webinar. You can stay online so you can keep downloading the files. If you need a certificate of attendance or copies of the PDF and or the digital booklet, go to our website's contact page at mediasavvycitizens.com and request a copy. Please stay in touch through our website, through our social media channels, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we are posting these webinars. So, wow, this is great. Thank you all for your for being here. And it is 2:50 on the money, and I'm going to close this webinar. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.